Hey, it's James, Father's Rights and Resources. Hashtag how I got custody. I want to talk to you about domestic violence restraining orders and these advocates that stand next to these women in court and give them legal advice and commit a crime while they're in court. I haven't dealt with an advocate standing there when my baby's mom tried 7 different times to get anti-harassment orders against me. It's all the same stuff. False allegations of DV, harassment, abuse, all that kind of stuff. But I see this all the time. I've seen it waiting for other cases. And I've seen it, I've just seen it over and over. A social worker comes in from the domestic violence advocacy place. And if I was in there, I would ask several questions. Number one, think about this. When you have an attorney, your ex-wife, ex-girlfriend has an attorney, what do they usually do at the beginning of the case? They identify themselves for the record. How come these social workers don't identify themselves? They're standing in court and sometimes they're leaning over and whispering something to the mother. And one of my questions is, how come you don't demand they identify themselves for the record? So the mother goes up and stands there and some lady is hugging her and leaning over and talking to her in between breaks or after the hearing. Sometimes after a hearing, you got to walk away and write up an order, and then you come back and talk at the podium. I would say at the beginning of one of these hearings, Your Honor, can we please have the lady who's talking next to the petitioner and giving her legal advice, or just say the person standing at the podium with the mother, could we have her identify herself for the record? And if they say, well, they're an advocate, that's to keep secret. You say, why? They're up here helping them in a legal proceeding. I've seen them lean over and give them legal advice or whisper in their ear. Why don't they have to identify them? Can I have a secret advocate helping me because I'm up here being falsely accused? You can always turn and spin stuff around whenever somebody says something stupid, dumb, or that's the typical MO of the court system. I can always come up with something, and it doesn't take a legal genius to do it. All it takes is somebody to think, what are they saying? What's this crap they're talking about? It's a secret? First of all, we're at the courthouse. There's sheriff deputies everywhere. This social worker, you're assuming that I'm guilty of domestic violence, and you're assuming you're taking a leap of faith and assuming I'm going to commit a crime against a social worker if her name is announced. She's coming into a legal proceeding and she's supporting the mother. And as far as I understand, she helped the mother draft this paperwork, which is another crime. So you're letting criminals come into court and not identify themselves? This is a legal proceeding. I have legal rights. I have a right to know who my accusers are. If she's helping the mother accuse me, I have a right to know who it is, especially if she's committing the crime of unauthorized practice of law. Now, I wouldn't just come out swinging like that right away. I'd wait till the commissioner or judge says something stupid. But if there's an advocate up there, they should identify themselves for the record as to who they are. Or else, I would say, okay, well, in that case, I need a continuance because I need a father's rights advocate to come up here and secretly stand next to me and secretly feed me information. Because if she gets an advocate, I sure as heck do, because I'm the accused one here. So I would be asking questions like that all the time. And eventually when it comes to trial, I would be calling that social worker as a witness. I would be reporting them to the Practice of Law Board in Washington State. There's a thing called the Practice of Law Board. They tried to get me a couple times. I had some clients who actually had mental illness and they didn't like that they talked to me, then they went to court and lost, which is a risk you take. And, one guy, he had restraining orders from multiple different people. I thought it was a setup. Turns out he was crazy. So anyway, I've had a couple of complaints with the Practice of Law Board. And I write them back and demand their legal authority and things like that. And they just go away and leave me alone because they don't want to mess with me. Because they're full of crap most of the time. And they're not. And the Bar Association isn't policing these attorneys who are sleeping with clients for free services, like David Contos in the Kent RJC area. He's a pro tem commissioner, so he was kicked off the pro tem rotation, and then he was rewarded to get back on it, even though he had slept with at least one client. It's well known for free services. What's his name? Michael J. Gallagher, don't be an every other weekend parent, charges $415 an hour or something like that. Sexually harasses his own employees, opposing party women during mediation. He watches porn on his phone and laughs at it and points to it with his clients with alcohol in his breath when he comes to court. His wife obviously doesn't care that he's sleeping around with everybody in the office or everybody that'll give him attention. But that, he has several houses and things like that he brags about all the time. But he once told 2 black female attorneys, "I'd love to be the cream in that Oreo cookie in the court hallways." So all kinds of sexually deviant perverts, and the opposing attorney in my case, who called an Asian attorney a lying chink, who forced women to live with him and work off their bill and slave labor and imprisoned them. The Bar Association, Donald Wayne Farrell, the Bar Association, and a guy named Jonathan Burke don't do anything about attorneys like that. So, but they got the Practice of Law Board looking for people practicing law without a license if they're father's rights advocates or things like that. So that's the route that they go. But if social worker gets up there and is standing there, I'm assuming that they're giving some information, especially if they lean over and whisper to them, I'm assuming and accusing them of practicing law without a license. And if the court says, well, they don't have to identify themselves, they're an advocate and they're helping this and doing that and yada yada, and they're going out of their way and we like to keep them secret. So, well, what's the big secret? She's giving legal advice. So if she's giving legal advice, then she must be an attorney, so she should identify herself for the record. Plus, this is the safest place in the world with all the sheriff deputies and a court here. Who's going to commit a crime at the courthouse? I'm not asking for her home address, her date of birth, who her boyfriend is, her zodiac sign, nothing. I'm just asking her to identify herself as a professional for the record. Unless we could just have, if we can have secret people come in and advocate for us, then I'm going to get one for me, and I'd like a continuance. So, and then if you get the name, or I'd go to the department and say, who appeared at this hearing, please? She's giving legal advice. And then I'd also follow up. I'd file a complaint with the Practice of Law Board, whatever state you're in. I'd file a complaint there with the Bar Association, and then I would file a complaint with the clerk of the courthouse and whatever department is the domestic violence department. They're advocates at helping people. And, they all go to social work schools to get a social worker license. So those schools, all they teach is a bunch of radical feminism. So they're always a victim, so they get away with all these extra protections and all this other stuff. And then I would file a claim with the licensing board, the state licensing board that issues license for social workers. That might be a Department of Social Work. I know psychologists, there might be a board of psychology, but whatever the board is in my state, I'd be filing a complaint with them regarding them committing the crime of practicing law without a license, and hold them accountable to the most thoroughly. And this is the problem. People go into court and do all kinds of stuff like this, and guys never hold them accountable. They never do anything about it, and the next cycle happens. The guys before you never held people accountable, never wrote complaints, never wrote bar complaints, never talked to the clerk about this type of misconduct or anything like that. So it happens to the next cycle of guys. You know what the next cycle of guys say? How come nobody's doing anything about this? Because most men are a bunch of lazy bums who don't want any drama and don't want to put any effort into this, while the radical feminists are banding together, sticking together, and zealously frothing at the mouth and fighting for their rights and equality, and 100 million times more than just equality. So that's what I do if some advocate walks into court when I'm facing a restraining order hearing.